Having called his supporters to come to Washington on January 6th, Trump turned his attention to a key player in his effort to stay in power, Vice President Mike Pence.
Today, we're focusing on President Trump's relentless effort to pressure Mike Pence to refuse to count electoral votes on January 6th.
The pressure campaign on Vice President Pence is the last gambit to keep Trump in power. I mean, basically, it's the last lever that they can pull to try and steal the election.
It was based on an obscure legal theory that the vice president had the power to overturn the election results.
Greg Jacob was counsel to Vice President Pence. He conducted a thorough analysis of the role of the Vice President in the joint session of Congress under the Constitution. I now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Aguilar.
Mr. Jacob, did you go to the Vice President's residences on the morning of January 6th?
Yes.
And did the Vice President have a call with the President that morning?
He did. We were told that a call had come in from the President. The Vice President stepped out of the room to take that call, and no staff went with him.
The President had several family members with him for that call. I'd like to show you what they and others told the Select Committee about that call, along with never-before-seen photographs of the President on that call from the National Archives.
When I entered the office the second time, he was on the telephone with who I later found out to be was the Vice President.
Could you hear the Vice President or only hear the President's end?
Only hear the President's end. But at some point it started off as a calmer tone and then became heated.
Donald Trump is focused on this idea that Pence, wielding the gavel on January 6th, could single-handedly overturn the election because he was presiding over this final certification of the electoral votes.
The conversation was pretty heated.
It's an extraordinary thing. A president pressuring a vice president this way, insulting him that way, a person who had been nothing but loyal to him through all those months and years.
Did Ms. Trump share with you any more details about what had happened?
Her dad had just had an upsetting conversation with the vice president.
It was a different tone than I'd heard him take with the vice president before.
I mean, I think she was uncomfortable over the fact that there was obviously that type of interaction between the two of them.
The word that she relayed to that the president called the vice president, I apologize for being impolite, but do you remember what she said her father called him?
The P word.
Trump told Pence, you have a choice. You can either be a patriot or you can be a pussy. Patriot means turn the election over to me. Being a pussy means being afraid to use your power.
Mr. Jacob, how would you describe the demeanor of the Vice President following the call with the President?
When he came back into the room, I'd say that he was steely, determined, grim.
In almost 4 years, it was the first serious break between Pence and Trump.
Donald Trump had every expectation that he would go along with him on this. Why wouldn't he? He had done everything else up until now. Pence is a vice president who has been exceedingly loyal to Trump. For 3 years, 11 months, and however many days, Mike Pence never, ever broke with the president.
Now Pence had to make a critical decision.
Pence had just a clear conflict between what Trump wanted him to do and what the Constitution and the rule of law required him to do. I think he'd managed to navigate those conflicts in various ways over 4 years, not always, in my view, the right way. But this was such a blatant transgression.
Pivotal to the plan was this man, John Eastman.
Here's this law professor, a member of the Federalists. His role was to provide a sort of a pseudo-intellectual cover for legal arguments.
And he manufactures this theory of the vice president's power that says that the vice president of the United States is the ultimate arbiter on January 6th. Those are his words, the ultimate arbiter. And Trump fully endorses Eastman's plan.
Well, John Eastman was one of my law clerks. Perhaps 20, 25 years ago, I was greatly concerned that John had given the advice that he had given.
Judge J. Michael Ludick is one of the leading conservative legal thinkers in the country. He served in administrations of President Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush.
Judge Ludick had a kind of moral authority within the conservative community. A guy himself who had been shortlisted for the Supreme Court, was on a first-name basis with members of the Supreme Court.
Judge Ludick, I had the incredible honor of serving as one of your law clerks. Another person who did was John Eastman. And you have written that Dr. Eastman's theory is, in your words, incorrect at every turn.
Mr. Eastman said to the president that there was both legal as well as historical precedent for the vice president to overturn the election. This is constitutional mischief. I would have laid my body across the road before I would have let the vice president overturn the 2020 election. I diagrammed his legal analysis from beginning to end and concluded that he was wrong at every turn of his analysis, every turn of his thinking.
Judge Ludick, you wrote that the efforts by President Trump to overturn the 2020 election were, quote, the most reckless, insidious, and calamitous failures in both legal and political judgment in American history. What did you mean by that?
Exactly what I said, Congressman.
White House lawyers had also warned about Eastman's theories, but Trump persisted, summoning the vice president to the Oval Office.
The Eastman plan. It was the last option for Donald Trump. January 4th, 2021, in the Oval Office, John Eastman, President Trump. They pull Vice President Pence in. He's joined by his aides, Greg Jacob and Mark Short. Trump says to Pence in front of others, you have to now listen to John Eastman. You have to follow the Eastman plan. Object to the certification. It's a pressure campaign. Pence says to Trump, I'm going to do what I can, Mr. President. I want to help you out, but I'm listening to my lawyers. He turns to Greg Jacob, his advisors, and he says, they're telling me I can't do it. I can't do it. It's not constitutional. It's not legal. Trump says you can do it. Listen to John.
Mr. Jacob, during that meeting between the president and the vice president, what theories did Dr. Eastman present regarding the role of the vice president in counting the electoral votes?
So during that meeting on the 4th, I think I raised the problem that Mr. Eastman's proposals would violate several provisions of the Electoral Count Act. Mr. Eastman acknowledged that that was the case.
Pence turns to Trump and says, are you listening to this? Do you hear this? But Trump isn't listening to that. He just is banging away on Pence. You're the guy who's going to keep us in power.
Pence stood firm.
This is a man who has been so loyal for so long. But I think at the end of the day, Mike Pence knew that he was going to uphold the Constitution. And he knew that he had no power to overturn and do the things that the president was saying.
The choice Mike Pence was facing was not really a choice. He had no choice to do anything other than count the votes that took place. But at this point, Donald Trump had surrounded himself with people who were feeding him more and more nonsense about how this process worked. It was just another situation of the president creating his own reality, deciding things that can happen that simply can't, and set Mike Pence up for the fall in a way that he had really no choice in what to do.
The pressure on Pence figures prominently in the indictment of Trump.
The defendant and co-conspirators attempted to enlist the vice president to use his ceremonial role at the January 6 certification proceeding to fraudulently alter the election results.
John Eastman is listed as one of those unindicted co-conspirators, though he still defends the advice he gave the president.
Trump's interactions with Pence, direct and indirect, are crucial. They really go to showing that part of the way he obstructed justice was trying to wrongfully pressure Pence, who had an official task, not to undertake that task.
Is the fact that Donald Trump asked him to do that, is that criminal? Again, I think you got to be really careful there. I don't think that's something you want to make criminal, on its own. The mere ask to say, I want you to not certify the results. It doesn't necessarily mean that it was a violation of the criminal law. It depends on context and what other evidence the government has.
Whether or not a particular act that the president is alleged to have engaged in is in and of itself a crime isn't really going to be the question at that trial. It's going to be whether that act was in furtherance of a criminal objective. All of these acts, all of the things that we've been talking about, they don't have to be illegal in and of themselves. The crime is a conspiracy to defraud the United States.